Hello everyone. If it's your first time to the channel, welcome, and if it's not, welcome back. For today's video, we're going to start a new segment where we're going to start playtesting some of the new OP03 decks that are going to be coming out at the end of June. And today specifically, we're going to be playing Ace, which I find to be really interesting. If you don't know, Ace's ability is, whether offensively or defensively, you can use an event, any event, as a 1k counter. So you can attack and discard an event and to give your character or to give the leader plus 1000, or you can use it as a 1k counter when you're defending. With that, it just adds a lot of versatility that you can do. You can run it a little bit more control style, you can run a little bit more aggro, and it just really doesn't have a bad matchup in against any of the other decks that you play against. So for the deck list, in this specific case, we're running 4 Otama, just a generic 2k counter. It's just probably the best 2k counter in the game, honestly. Give characters minus 2k power. Running 2 Makino, because we're also running 4 Izo and 4 Buggies, so you can just pump up those Izos and those Buggies, make them good attackers. Running 4 Jozu, 2k counter, and it's a Whitebeard Pirates character. Running 4 of the blocker Marco. It's just a good blocker and can stay on the boards. It has really high survivability. Running 4 of the new Marco, which is a 5 cost 6000 power character, which on play KOs a character with 3000 power. So it kind of replaces Vista in that aspect. But it also has the survivability of the Phoenix, which is when it's KO'd, regardless of your life, you can discard an event to revive it in rested. Running 4 Ace just because it's so good for board pressure, for just removing big threats on the board. And we're actually trying something new out today. We're running 3 Shanks instead of 3 Whitebeard, and that's because especially against yellow, the only blocker that yellow runs is the 3 cost 1k power, and so Shanks can just attack right over it. And then outside of that, we're running just a big combination of events where it's 4 Radical Beams, 3 Seaquakes, 4 of the Searcher Whitebeard, 4 Crossfire, and 2 Jet Pistols. You can really run any events that you want. You can run more Jet Pistols. You can run the 7 cost Flame Emperors. But I just figured for now we'll try this build out, kind of see how it does, and then if anything we can kind of change it up later on. So with that, let's get into the gameplay. So for the first game, we have a matchup against Yellow Katakuri, which I know a lot of people are also interested in playing. It has a really unique ability that can help with life manipulation. It's a really cool mechanic. So my opponent is going first. I'm going second. I do have the Whitebeard Searcher, so I decided to play it. I was torn between grabbing a Marco or the Izo. I choose to get an Izo. Play the Izo. And then the only thing I can grab here is the Seaquake, since Izo can't grab Izo. Then I pass. My opponent goes to 3 Dawn. Against yellow, you want to go second. Most yellow's strongest curve is 2, 4, 6, 8. Because on 4 they can play any of their Cracker. They can play Smoothie if they have it. Then on 8 they can play the 8 drop Katakuri. 10 they can play the 10 drop Big Mom, and so you want to try to keep them off the 10 drop Big Mom if possible. They play the Pero, and I use my 2 of my events to get rid of it. So kind of want to clear their board pressure. Pero's ability is that on KO it can search top 3 for Whitebeard Pirates, and so that's what it does. I play my Whitebeard Searcher, get another Izo, and then I swing for 5 at life. My opponent takes, and I pass. Now my opponent is at 5 Dawn. So there's really any combination of plays he can make. He does attach 1 Dawn to Katakuri, his leader, and that allows him to use this ability, which is automatically give it plus 1000, so it swings for 7, and he can either look at the top of my life or the top of his own life, and then whichever he chooses he can rearrange either to put it on top or bottom. And then he plays the Cracker with 4 drop, which is if his life is less than mine, it's a double attack. Kind of looking through my hand to see what I have. I'm at 6 Dawn. So I have an Ezo that I can play. I have 2 4-drop Marcos. I also have a 5-drop Marco. He takes and he gets a Cracker out of life, which is the scariest part about yellow, is even when you attack their life, a lot of times they just end up developing board. Because most of the characters have trigger. I do play the 5-drop Marco, then I play the Ezo. And thinking about what to get, I decided to get another 5-drop. Yellow doesn't have too much removal, so that's a good thing. They do have Thunderbolt, which is a 2-drop event that kills a 5 cost or less. But outside of that, most of the abilities are concerning life manipulation. Here my opponent's at 7 Dawn. So if he has it, he'd probably play the 7-drop Big Mom, which makes it to where I choose either I lose a life or my opponent gains a life. He decides to put 2 Dawn on his Cracker instead, which I take. He now has 5 Dawn left. So he could use Leader ability. And then play another 4-drop. He swings for 5 first, which I do counter out of. He decides to use his Leader ability to swing for 7. Which I also counter out of. You don't want to go too low against yellow. Because once they play the 10-drop, then you're automatically down to 1 or 0 life. And then they go back up to 3 or 4. And then they do play the Smoothie. I have the Aso, which is why I played the 5-drop Marco earlier, so I can have 2 attackers, and the Ezo. I knew that with the Ace, I've dropped them both down to 2, and then my Ezos can clean up the board. Unless he decides to counter out of it, but probably shouldn't. Decides to. So I'll probably just KO it with my Leader. And then I can swing 7 and 7 with my Marco and my Ace. I will say Ace took me some getting used to. It's a completely different playstyle than any other deck. It's just really, really unique. There's times where you have no counter in hand, but you have a lot of events, and so you just kind of have to make sure that you use your board properly, or else you'll lose your board, and there's nothing you can do to defend it. In this case, I do happen to have a good bit of characters and counter in hand, so that helps, but there's been times where I've played and you have 5 event cards. And so you have to make sure you keep up either the right Dawn, or you keep up enough characters to kind of re-attack your opponent if they do decide to go for your board. Here my opponent attaches 3 Dawn to his Leader. It's probably going to 5 Dawn, so he's probably going to swing at the Ace for 11. And I don't have the counter in hand to defend it, so I just let it go. And he still has 4 Dawn. So could play a Pero, a Cracker, a Smoothie. Most yellows don't run the vanilla. Swings for 7 at life, which I do counter out of. I use an Otama and the non-blocker Marco. Now I have 10 Dawn. So I play the Ace, lower the Smoothie, attack into it with the Ezo. My opponent leaves 2 Dawn up, so he could have the Ikoku Sovereignty, I believe is how it's pronounced, which is a 2 cost that gives plus 5k. I attach 1 Dawn to my Marco, swing for 7. He takes. I attack for 7 with my ace as well. Which he does use the, I guess it's a 3 drop. It's a 3. No, he only had 2 energy up there. Either way, I would end up playing the buggy to get an event, put another character on board, and then swing for 6 at life. And pass. And then my opponent decides to give up, and that is a GG for the first game. And then the second game, we have a matchup against Whitebeard, which is crazy to say, but Whitebeard gets even stronger in the third set as you get the Ezo, which is a searcher, and just adds a lot more consistency to the deck. I am going first, so I play the buggy and get a jet pistol, which I know that I'll be able to use by turn 5, where my opponent would probably play on his turn 4 or 4 dawn turn. He could play one of the vanillas. Plays a Nami, draws a Luffy. And then passes turn. Okay, so Ikaku Sovereignty is a 2 drop. Just looked like it said 3, but it is a 2 drop that gives +5. Here, I decide to attach 1, swing for 6, and I'll probably play the buggy and the Ezo. My opponent counters out of it. Play the Ezo first. I already have an ace in hand, so I decide to get the 5 drop Marco. And then I play a buggy to get another event. And I get a Radical Beam. And I pass. My opponent swings for 6. So I should take this. Yep. I decide to take, and I do get a Shanks. And then he plays the 4 drop. And so here I should just jet pistol the 4 drop and then attach 1 dawn to the ace, to my ace leader, and swing for 6. I want to get as many cards out of my opponent's hand as I can. And then in a couple turns I'll be able to play, well, next turn I'll be able to play my ace. So I can start applying even more pressure. I do also have a Marco that I can play. Plays a Vista to KO my buggy. Plays a Robin and swings for 6. Which I take. I was hoping to get an Otama. Because now I can Otama. I can Otama a Marco to KO the Robin. I also have a Makino that I can use to put a lot more pressure, start swinging at the leader a little bit. That's what I decide to do. I play the Makino, pump up the buggy, and then swing for 6. My opponent counters out of it. I put 1 under my leader, swing for 6 again. And then I play my Marco and KO the Vista. I could have played the Otama and KO'd the Robin, but this way I'm guaranteed to get a few more cards out of hand. And I'm okay with my opponent attacking my board. As it means that my characters act as blockers in a way. He uses the Robin ability, KOs the Makino and the buggy. Swings for 6 at life. I have a Jozu and I have an Otama. So I decide to use the Jozu just because of Otama's versatility. I could have also used the Otama and kept the Jozu to use as a discard for the for my blocker Marco, but I know with the Otama, I can Otama the Luffy, and then I can kill it with the Marco a lot easier. I get the Whitebeard Searcher trigger out of life, so I search and I grab an Izo. Then my opponent passes. I draw a Crossfire, which is one of the new events. Which it's a main and a counter 2 costs that gives minus 4,000 to one of my opponent's characters. I play the Ace, and then I swing with the Izo into the Nico Robin, which he lets go. I swing with my leader at his Luffy, which he also lets go. Then I swing for 6 with my Marco at the leader. She counters out of. I put 1 Dawn under the Ace, which he uses a Radical Beam for, and then I play the Izo. And then I can get a Jozu, or I can get a blocker Marco. Either's not a bad option, either the counter or a potential blocker. I decided to get the blocker just so in case he plays a Whitebeard in the near future, I have blockers that he can't get rid of easily. He swings with the Nami on my Izo to clear it. Then he does play the Whitebeard. And then swings for 8 at my Ace, which I counter out of with the Otama. Then he passes. His leader is at 6 or at 8k now because of the Whitebeard effect. I swing with my Izo into the Nami, and I actually made a mistake here. I don't know why I thought for a second that the leader was 7. It's just complete mistake. I should have put that Dawn under the Ace instead, so I ended up doing that anyway. But it was just a small mistake on my part. He counters out of the Ace swing, and then I decide to play double Marco here, as I am down to 2 life, and so I can start using the Marco ability. My opponent plays an Ace and then uses this ability to lower my Ace and one of my Marcos, so he can use his Whitebeard to KO one of the Marcos and swings at my other Marco. To bring back the Marco, I have to pitch either the Crossfire or the Marco in my hand. I decide to pitch the Marco in my hand to bring it back. Then I let the other Marco dies, and I use a Radical Beam to counter out or to bring him back. He puts 1 Dawn under his leader and swings for 7 at my Ace, which there's nothing I can do here. It's just gonna die. And then he still has an Ace. Well, I decide to block the Ace to try to save it. And that way, if he wants to kill it, he has to attack it with his own Ace, which he does and passes. I draw a Seaquake. So I can get rid of the Ace using the Crossfire and the Seaquake, as the Crossfire would put it down to 3,000. And that's what I decide to do. I use the Crossfire, put it down to 3. I could also, instead of using the Seaquake, I can just attach some Dawn to my Izo and attack it, which I do. I attach 3 Dawn to put it up to 5. That way, if my opponent wants to save it, then he has to give me 2 cards out of hand. He has a really small hand size at the moment, and so I'm okay with him giving me cards. Then I attack for 8 with my Marco. He counters out of it, and I put 3 Dawn under my leader. Swing for 8, which he takes, putting him down to no life, and then I still have the Marco blocker in hand. I decide not to use the Seaquake and attack with the Izo instead, so that because the Seaquake acts as counter because of the my Ace's ability. Then he plays an Ace, and I get lucky, and I trigger a Crossfire out of life, and so my opponent just gives up after that because I think he was going to try to go for game there. And with that, that was a GG. Now for the third and final game, we have a matchup against Nami, which Nami is also a new ability or a new leader that was released in OPO3 with a unique ability where she has an alternate win condition, and that's the first time it's occurred in the game. She can mill her, if she completely mills her deck, then she wins. And so, depending on the variation of Nami that you play, some people play a stall version where they don't even interact with the opponent and just constantly try to mill themselves out of deck. Some play more of a blue-centric deck where they play, you know, all the blue good stuff. The Dofis, the Mihawks, the blockers, things of that nature. My opponent plays an Usopp's Pirates, which I'm not entirely sure why, because he doesn't have an Usopp in grave yet. Probably didn't have any other play. And here I just decide to, I don't have a play either, so I decide to swing for 9. Blue has a lot of events, Nami runs a lot of events that are small cost, that are either 0 or 1, and a lot of them cause milling. And so I decided to attack that big so that he has to give me multiple cards out of hand. Instead of just, you know, giving me, you know, the Rubber Band of Doom or I believe the 0 cost is called Gum Gum Navel, maybe. My opponent gets the Pot of Greed, or uses the Pot of Greed, which is the Sanji's Peel-Off, which is a 3 cost that lets him draw 2 cards. Then swings for 5. And then passes. I'm up to 5 Dawn now, and I still don't have the best characters to be able to put on board. I do put a Marco up. I probably should have swung first and then put the Marco. Blue doesn't have a lot of removal though. But it does have cards that, it does have triggers that bounce the hand. My opponent counters out of it. And then I play the Makino. I didn't want to just leave 1 Dawn up. My opponent plays a Nojiko, bounces the Marco back to hand. Which Nojiko is just a really strong card. So 2 cost on play, return a character with the cost of 5 or less to the owner's hand. And it's a 1k counter. So when playing Nami, it's a better Brickfist. Now opponent plays a Boa blocker and passes. I'm at 7 Dawn now, so I could play the Ace. Could play another Marco and just swing for big numbers. I decide to swing for 5 first with my leader. See what my opponent wants to do here. He blocks. And then I play the Ace. And I swing for 7 at life. My opponent takes, and then he passes. Or then I pass. He's kind of thinking. He plays another Sanji's Peel-Off, draws 2 more cards. With blue, you just never know what you're going to get. Especially against Nami. There's a lot of times where you get to this point where they have a lot of cards in hand. Plays the Bellamere, attaches 1 Dawn to it. Swings for 5 at life. I take, and then he passes. I get a Makino out of life, and then I get an Izo. There's the Izo where I can finally start play it. and then next turn start gaining a little bit more advantage with the Makino. I swing for 5 again. I am probably going to play the Shanks though. Swing for 7. She takes. He uses the Rubber Band of Doom to draw 1, trash 1. I do decide to play the Izo, so I go a little bit wider on the board. Get a Whitebeard Pirates. And then play double blocker and pass. My opponent plays a 3rd Sanji's Pilaf. The card's just going to be such a good staple for blue going forward. And then he decides to play the Sogeking and bounces the Marco to hand. He's definitely playing an interesting build with a lot of the new cards. I think that's just going to be such a refreshing take for the game in general. Just there's going to be so many new decks that you can play, so much variation. Swings for 5. At my life, I counter out of it with an Otama. I mean, there's going to be Black Lucci. You could play Black Smoker. Within yellow, there's 2 viable leaders in the Big Mom and Katakuri. Ace becomes viable now as a new red deck. Luffy will still probably be solid. Whitebeard and Zoro will get better. I think green is the only deck that kind of suffers a little bit with this new release, which I think's okay because green was the best deck in set 1 and may not have started off. It started off doing okay in set 2 with Kinemon, and then it kind of tailed off, and now with the film Kid and all the new variations of Kid, it's just starting to pop back up again. I think red's the one that probably needs to be nerfed just a little bit, but I think a lot of the other it's not so far ahead that none of the other decks can compete. Just on any given day, red can lose to black, can lose to yellow, can lose to green. Red loses to blue, which is oddly enough the blue's best matchup. Purple at times too, but for the most part, red. And then here I've kind of exerted a good bit of pressure on my opponent. Just kind of playing more powerful characters and kind of going over him. He does play a blocker. It'd be interesting to see if what Nami lists anyone or someone can put together that'll make it its most competitive form. Having lost Kabaji really hurts in the cycling of the deck, and so we'll see if either the milling aspect of it or the more control aspect of it with the Doflamingos and the Mihawks and stuff become the better version. But Nami herself is just such a fan favorite character that I don't believe that no one will play her. Then here my opponent's doing a little mix of going after my board and then kind of swinging at my life. I do happen to have a lot of counter in hand this game, so I'm able to defend myself quite well. And he's attacking for smaller numbers, and so it's just nice and easy to just one card at a time kind of get out of the attacks. I keep using the Makino ability, which finally is paying off. Pump up my Izo. My opponent's at 0 life, which was just 1 blocker, so I decided to swing for 7. Start getting some cards out of hand. He does use the Gum Gum Giant Gavel to get out of it. Then I swing for 7. Which he counters out of. And then here, my opponent only has the blocker and 3 cards in hand, which would put him at 11k. So I have to swing for... I decide to swing for 9. See what he wants to do. If he wants to counter out of it, then he has to give me all 3 cards in hand. Looking back, I think 11 with the ace would have been more correct. Well, no, I lie. There's a 0 cost blue that I kind of forgot about. And it's just, it makes numbers a little bit more different when you're playing against blue. And then black is also going to get a 0 cost event. But no, with that, let's get into the final thoughts. Ace is a very strong deck. Arguably it's hard to say that it's going to be the best deck because Zoro and Whitebeard are just so good. And so from the red decks, I'd probably say it's number 3. It can compete with the other 2, but it'll probably be a little bit weaker. But it is still a really strong deck, and it's such a unique play style that both using it and playing against it will favor the more skilled user. And so if you play a Zoro or you play a Whitebeard or you play, Big Mom, if the person doesn't know how to play against Ace because it has such a unique play style, you're going to have a huge advantage. Whereas the same, if you play against really skilled opponents and you don't know how to use your own deck, you're just going to struggle a lot. And there's so many variations that you can run with Ace. You can run the other event cards where there's a 3 cost event card where you discard 1, you KO a 5k and a 4k, or you KO a 5k and a 4k character, so that can be really good against Law and Zoro. There's the 7-drop Flame Emperor that KOs an 8k character and then gives your leader plus 3000 in double attack, which will be really good against primarily yellow. It can also be good against Whitebeard, as it runs, the 4-drop vanillas. And so I would say depending on the meta that you're going to be playing a lot against, either in your locals or events that you go to, that's what you can tech some of your events a little bit more. There's some that are just generically good, Jet Pistol, Seaquake is really good, Radical Beam. You can include guard points. Just the options are almost endless. There's also the Striker version that you can use, which I didn't choose to use. It just feels like this one's a little bit more consistent. But there's a Striker one, which is you can use your stage to draw more events. And so I think it's really exciting that the new set just introduces so many more options and so many more viable decks and things that you can tech and play. And it's why I'm so excited for the new set. And so we're going to keep play testing some new decks. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe. And I hope that you all have an amazing day.